I'm thrilled to have with us in our final segment Paul Matthews, who is the new Executive Director of the Worcester Regional Research Bureau, but not new to Worcester by any shape, manner, or form. A Worcester resident, taxpayer, homeowner, parent, somebody who's been involved in a variety of different ways in important issues of public policy and advocacy. Paul, welcome home from a work point of view.
Thank you, Tim, and I'm thrilled to be here, and I'm thrilled to be the new Executive Director of the Bureau and to be working with you in the Chamber and everyone else in the city on the hard issues affecting the city moving forward.
Yeah, well, as you kind of just jumped in, we ran our candidates debates this year, which for the school committee, for the at-large race, the mayor's race, and the one district race. And the crowds were decent at those events, but one of the things with our other partner, the Telegram and Gazette, people really were following this on Facebook Live.
It was fascinating. It was a great exercise in collaboration with you in the Chamber and the Telegram, and Mechanics Hall hosted most of them. It's fascinating to me that we did fill the room for each of these debates, but the virtual community watching it, to your point, is much bigger than I think either of us expected. The school committee debate, which typically is the political afterthought compared to the city council, we had over 8,000 views on Facebook Live for that debate, which I think really proves the point that debate was driving political interest coming into the election.
Yeah, no, definitely a lot going on. But if our viewers are not completely familiar with the Worcester Regional Research Bureau and the work that it does, maybe you could give us a little bit of a overview.
I'd be happy to, and it would be completely understandable if they don't know about the Bureau, because the Bureau has been focused on doing our job and doing it well and getting publicity second. So the Bureau is 34 years old. I'm in very solid shoes because I'm only the third executive director in 34 years. So the first executive director was Roberta Schaefer, who led it for, I think 28 years. Tim McGorthy, the city's former chief development officer, ran it before me for 5. And I'm very fortunate, as you point out, Tim, I'm a lifelong Worcester resident, and this came up in a meeting yesterday when we were comparing generations in Worcester. Right. I'm a 4th generation Worcester resident, which I've never thought about, and the 5th generation, as you know, are my 2 kids. So it's really meaningful to me to be at the Bureau, which was formed and tasked with identifying opportunities and challenges facing Greater Worcester and working with government and other entities like the Chamber to help educate the public and policymakers. So it's already, this is like week 10 for me, but it's been a great experience working with you in the Chamber on issues like commuter rail and transportation and the debates. And there's no shortage of issues for us to work on, as you know.
Right. And that's the piece. I mean, it's incredibly important to have an organization that can kind of do the deep dive into kind of policy research, policy formulation, what are best practices that you can suggest that municipal government can undertake, the business community in tandem with government, what are the trends that are happening. Right before you arrived, the RTA issue was something that, interestingly enough, in your former job, you were involved with. But maybe just talk about how that has then created this whole community conversation about regional transit, how they tie into the larger piece.
No, I'm happy to, Tim, and thanks for the opportunity. The report that you're talking about, we issued a few months ago about boosting ridership on the RTA. And the report itself, the RTA, the Worcester RTA, is a great community asset, and it's one that has not gotten a lot of attention over the years. We're all focused on commuter rail and congestion. The RTA is a critical, as you know, a critical point serving and addressing congestion needs and part of the city's transportation network. Our report talked about ways of boosting ridership, including identifying that several other RTAs nationally have identified means of reducing fares on certain routes with subsidies or other sources of revenue. So it sort of took off from the sense of there's a lot of public interest in that concept, how to boost ridership. There's a lot of active constituency work, some of the city councilors, some of the city officials, some of the legislators. On the state level, to your point, I helped start the Metro West RTA 12 years ago in Framingham, and the state stepped up and the legislature created an RTA working group on performance and funding that was led by Harriet Chandler and a lot of Worcester-based input, which has led the state to have a renewed emphasis on regional transit with funding, but also asking for strategic plans, route development, and other standardization.
And better accountability for the RTAs. I mean, let's face it, some run really well. others don't. And taxpayers, business owners, shouldn't be just funding old kind of operating models. That if we're going to be we want our RTAs to be nimble,
Yes.
meeting needs, and so funding should come with accountability.
It should, and frankly, a lot of the RTAs, their routes were developed decades ago, and it's hard for them to update the routes based on commuting patterns, for instance, your members. Employers typically have pretty set schedules and have a pretty good idea of when their staff are coming and going. So there's a critical opportunity there for the RTA to help fill the gap, but it's hard for them sometimes to think strategically in that regard. So part of the conversation you've been leading as one of the co-chairs of the Business Coalition of Transportation is that idea of linking with the RTAs and having some workforce and business input into their proceedings. And I think we're moving in that direction. I think part of it, the Bureau advanced with our report, part of it is the statewide conversation, and part of it is the state RTA task force. So I'm hopeful we're going to end up with a stronger product, and one that helps move people to Polar Park, but also employment and a commuter rail, and helps address some of the congestion issues.
Yeah, and if we're going to be serious about addressing greenhouse gas emissions, we've got to do a better job on transportation, because that's unfortunately been growing in terms of the emissions. And just the few moments we have left, anything on the horizon that the Research Bureau is going to be working on, or people should be looking for, or is that still to be determined?
Well, like week 10, I don't want to get ahead of my executive committee revealing a complete schedule of reports. I'm meeting with them individually to get a sense of, and people like you, over what other topics the Bureau can make an impact on. I think it's quite clear based on our work together in this conversation, transportation is clearly an issue where beyond the RTA, there's an opportunity for the Bureau to help inform the work of the city, the chamber, our legislative delegation on issues like commuter rail, congestion, I-90. So that's something we are absolutely making a priority.
Right. Well, I want to congratulate you with the executive board of the Research Bureau on a good decision, a great decision, bringing you back home full time. And you won't be adding any more to the Route 9, 495,
No.
290 congestion.
No, my carbon impact is
carbon impact has
negligible
been
now.
greatly reduced. But Paul, we look forward to having you back and members of your team on the show to talk about your reports and the work you guys are doing.
Thank you, Tim. Always happy to, and thanks for the opportunity.
Great.